As such distances went, she was close to that spiral, no more than 10 or 20,000 light-years above its core. But the thought of distances broke her mood. She pulled the computer close. "Did we lose them?" she said to it. "Pursuit has halted 40 trillion light-years from this location and is holding there." 40 trillion! That was beyond the reach of the farthest telescopes, over the event horizon generated by the Big Bang itself. Galaxies past that point were traveling with intrinsic velocities faster than light, and so could not be seen. It was questionable whether such bodies could even really be considered in the same universe as Earth. "Long way from home," she said softly. "Okay. I have at least a couple of days to rest and do some research, huh?" "Affirmative." She sat back on her heels and watched the light rise until the last delicate streamers of light from the barred spiral arms were all the way above the horizon. "I want all the details about this star system," she said. "Planets, what kind of star, who lives here, if anybody, who's been here before. Get to work." "Working," said the computer, and its screen went to the usual menu configuration while it sat silently, getting the information for her. "Can you multitask now?" Dairine said. "Affirmative." "Good." She selected the manual function and began sorting through it for background material on the lone one. "There has to be something I can use against it," she thought. "A weapon of some kind, a weakness." She instructed the manual's research facility to sort for past conflicts of wizards with the lone power or its representatives, and was shocked and horrified to find the equivalent of 20 or 30,000 pages worth of abstracts. She skimmed 10 or 15 of them in reverse order, on a hunch, and was momentarily surprised to find an abstract of Nita's last active mission. Fascinated, Dairine began to read, and became horrified again. There had been some kind of ceremony in the waters off Long Island, a sort of underwater passion play with whales as the celebrants, and Nita, to save the East Coast and make this ceremony work, had volunteered to be eaten by a shark. Nita? My sister? Do anything braver than cross the street? The idea was ridiculous, but Dairine knew that this computer had better things to do than lie to her. She read the rest of the abstract with her insides turning cold. Nita had knowingly taken on that lone power face to face and had managed to come out of it alive, whereas Dairine had been glad enough to run away and lose things that couldn't be more than its lesser henchmen. Dairine pushed that thought away resolutely. She was helped by her stomach, which growled at her. When did I last eat? She wondered. She told the computer to sort through and save the descriptions of encounters with the power that had been successful, and then got out of the manual into the hide facility. A moment's poking around among the options, and she had retrieved her loaf of bread, bologna, and mustard. Dairine sat there in cheerful anticipation for a few seconds, undoing the bread and bologna, and it wasn't until she got the mustard jar lid unscrewed that she realized she had no knife. "Oh, well," she said, and went back into the hide facility to snitch one from the silverware drawer at home. But illegal function call, said the computer, a little sullenly, she thought. "Explain." "Out of range for transit function from stated location." Dairine made a face. She had no idea of the coordinates of any closer silverware drawer. "Cancel," she said, and made do with her fingers. Some minutes later, she had a sandwich and a half inside her and was thinking, as she finished getting herself more or less clean, that it was a good thing she liked mustard. Dairine brushed the crumbs off onto the slick surface she sat on and looked at it, mildly curious. It wasn't freezing cold to sit on like the stones of Mars or Pluto, yet her shields were still snowing water vapor gently into the vacuum around her whenever she moved, telling her that the above-surface temperature was the usual cold of deep space. Geothermal? She wondered. Maybe some volcanic activity. That would explain those funny conical shapes against the horizon. She thumped the computer in a friendly fashion. "You done yet?" she said. "Specify." Dairine rolled her eyes, but there was no escaping the GIGO principle, garbage in, garbage out, as the programmer said. Give the poor machine incomplete questions or instructions, and you would get incomplete answers back. This thing might be magic, but it was still a computer. Are you done with the survey of this area? Still running. How much longer? 3.2 minutes. Dairine sat back to wait, absently rubbing the surface she sat on. The smoothness of it was strange. Not even the Maria on the moon were this smooth. Volcanic eruption, maybe. But not the way it usually happens, with the lava flowing down the volcano's sides and running along the surface. Not enough gravity for it to do that, I guess. Maybe it's like the volcanoes on Io. The stuff goes up high in tiny bits or droplets, then comes down slowly in the low gravity and spreads itself out very smooth and even. It must go on all the time, or else there can't be much in this system in the way of even tiny meteors. Maybe both. She shook her head. It spoke of an extremely ancient planet, which made sense this far out in space. Ready, the computer said, and Dairine hunkered over it to listen. Local system stats. System age, close order of 8 billion years. 1 primary type S6 star off main sequence. Time from fusion ignition, close order of 5 billion years. 1 associated micro-black hole in variable orbit. 1 planet, distance from primary, 612 million miles. Planet diameter, 56,000 miles. Planet circumference, 175,000 miles. And Dairine gulped, understanding now why that horizon ran so high. The planet was almost 7 times the size of Earth. Atmosphere, monatomic hydrogen, less than 1/50 millionth psi Terran sea level. Planetary composition, 80% silicon in pure form and compounds, 10% iron and mid-sequence metals, 7% heavy metals, 1% boron, 1% oxygen, 1% trace elements, including frozen gases and solid-sequence halogens. Power advisory. The screen, which had been echoing all this, went blank. Dairine's stomach flip-flopped, from fear this time. What's the matter? System power levels nearing critical. Range to alternative power claudication exceeded. Outside power source required. Dairine paused, feeling under her hand that oddly non-cold surface. Can you use geothermal? She said. Affirmative. Is there some way you can tap what's in this planet, then? Affirmative, said the computer. Authorization for link. Granted, Dairine said, mildly surprised. She couldn't remember the computer ever asking her for permission to do anything before. Maybe it was a safety feature. Then she began to sweat a little. Maybe such a safety feature was wise. If the computer fried its chips somehow and left her without life support, sitting here naked to vacuum at heaven knew how many degrees below zero. She watched the screen nervously as scrambled characters flashed on it, and for several awful seconds, the screen blanked. Then the menu screen reasserted itself, and Dairine breathed out, slowly, while the computer went back to running the program it had been working on. Link established, said the computer in absolute calm. Planetary history. Just print it to the screen. I'll read it, Dairine said, and started to pick the computer up, then paused. Is it all right to move you? Will that hurt the link? Negative effect on link. She lifted the computer into her lap and went on reading. It was as she had thought. The planet periodically became volcanically active, and the volcanoes spewed a fine mist of lava all over the landscape, airbrushing the glassy surface on a gigantic scale with vividly colored trace elements. Subsequent layering muted the colors, producing the dappled translucence she sat on. Dairine hit the return for another screenful of data, and the screenful appeared, and her stomach flipped again. Planetary history, page 2 of 16. Help, GR118655. This unique structure becomes more interesting when considering the physical nature of the layering. Some 92% of the layers consist of chemically pure silicon. Get to one Doctor 11111111111111111. I blew it up, Dairine whispered, horrified. Oh no, I fried its brains. I blew it up! She took a deep breath, not sure how many more of them she was going to get, and gingerly hit the return to see what would happen. Nita popped out into a canopy of starlit darkness and a carpet of dim light, breathing very hard. Earth's gravity well was no joke. Pushing her own mass and enough air to breathe for a while up out of that heavy pull was a problem. She walked over to a boulder, dusted it off, and sat down, panting, to admire the view while she waited for Kit. The usual place where they met was, of course, the moon. Nita liked it there. Working and thinking were always easy there, in the great silence that no voices but astronauts and wizards had broken since the moon's dust was made. This particular spot, high in the lunar Caucasus mountain chain, was a favorite of Kit's, a flat-topped peak in a wild, dangerous country of jagged gray-white Alps, cratered and pocked by millennia of meteoric bombardment. Piles of rock tumble lay here and there, choking the steep valleys where the sheer heat and cold of the lunar days had been enough to flake solid rock away from itself in great glassy or pumicey chunks. Off to one side, the pallid rim of the little crater Calipus scraped razor-sharp against the sky, and over it hung the Earth. The moon was at first quarter, so the Earth was at third, a blinding half-world, blazing blue-green, almost painful to look at until the eyes got used to it. It shed a cool, faint blue-white light over everything. A curl of white storm weather lay over the northwestern Pacific, and there vanished, for down the middle of it the Terminator ran, the edge of night, creeping ever so slowly toward the west. Most of North America lay in the darkness, and city lights lay golden in faint glittering splashes and spatters, with brighter sparkling patches under the Great Lakes and on the California coast. Nita shrugged out of her knapsack, opened it, and rechecked the contents. It was a good assortment, varied enough to handle several different classes of spell, specific enough to those classes to let her save some power for herself. She pulled her manual out and started paging through it for the tracker spell that she and Kit would need when he got here. It was actually a variant of the one he had threatened to put on Dairine in the city. This one hunted for the characteristic charged string residue left in space by the passage of a wizard's transit spell through it. Nita's specialty was astronomy, so she had been shocked to find that empty space wasn't actually empty, and even the hardest vacuum had in it what physicists called strings, lines of potential force that have nothing to do with most of the forces physicists understand. Wizards, of course, could use them. Much of what passes for telekinesis turns out, in fact, to be string manipulation. The tracker spell made most elegant use of it. And once we find her, Nita thought, I'm going to tie a few of those strings around her neck. But it didn't do to start a wizardry in such a mood. Nita pulled her space pen out of her pocket, kicked some of the larger rocks out of her way. They bounced off down the mountain as slowly as soap bubbles, and began drawing the circle for the transit spell. It was becoming an old familiar diagram, this one. The basic circle, knotted with the wizard's knot, her own personal data, reduced by now, after much practice, to one long scrawl in the precise and elegant shorthand version of the speech. Kit's data, another scrawl, over which she took even more care than her own. What a wizard names in the speech is defined so. Inaccurate naming can alter the nature of the named, and Nita liked Kit just the way he was. A third long scrawl of shorthand for Pichu. Nita looked oddly at some of the variables in it, but Tom had given her the data, and he certainly knew what he was doing. Then the internal diagrams, the intent factors, the point of origin, the intended point of arrival or vector of travel, the desired result, the time parameters and conditional statements for life support, the balloon diagram for the ethical argument. Nita wiped sweat and grit off her face and muttered at the incessant hissing in the background. Dust flew freely in 1/6 gravity and got in everything.